Quick thought experiment. Imagine your own brother started telling people he was God. Not metaphorically. Literally, the God who made the universe, standing in your kitchen, wearing your hand-me-downs. What would you actually think? Because someone in history did not have to imagine this. He lived it. And the Gospel of Mark tells us exactly what his family's first reaction was. They went to get him because, in the text's own words, people were saying he is out of his mind, not strangers, his own household. The Gospel of John is even blunter. One line, almost thrown away, for not even his brothers believed in him. Plural, brothers. The people who shared his table, his work, his whole childhood in Nazareth did not think he was the Messiah. They thought he'd lost it. Now, jump forward maybe 25 years. One of those same brothers, a man named James, is running the entire Jerusalem church. The Apostle Paul, the movement's most important missionary, travels there specifically to meet him and calls him one of its 3 pillars. When there's a first-century argument that could split the whole new religion, it's James who stands up and settles it. And it's not just Christian sources saying this. The Jewish historian Josephus, no friend of the movement, casually mentions, in the middle of an unrelated political dispute, the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James. He was stoned to death around 62 AD, on the order of a high priest who was later removed from office partly because of it. So somewhere in that gap, the brother who thought he was crazy became the brother who died for him. What happened in between is the whole video. Let's go find it in order, and I'll flag what's early and solid versus what's later and shakier, because those aren't the same thing. First, the doubt itself. Mark's gospel is usually dated within about 40 years of the crucifixion, and this detail is what scholars call embarrassing. Nobody inventing a hero story writes in his own founder's family calling him insane. You only keep a line like that if it actually happened. Second, the turn. Paul, writing a letter in the 50s AD, so within about 20 years of the events, quotes something even older, a fixed creed he says he received from the people before him. It lists who saw the risen Jesus, Peter, the 12, over 500 people at once. And then, one name, on its own line, then he appeared to James. A private appearance, specifically to the brother who hadn't believed. Third, right after that, the book of Acts shows James's brothers suddenly praying alongside the disciples. No explanation given for the change. Then Paul, in his letter to the Galatians, casually refers to meeting James, the Lord's brother, like it's just a known fact of church leadership. Then Acts 15, James settling the biggest dispute in the early church. Then Josephus, the stoning. 4 independent threads, a gospel, a private letter, a history of the church, a Jewish historian, all landing on the same shape. Skeptic, then witness, then leader, then martyr. Now the honest caveats. Because the story gets more colorful the later the source. Josephus's version is plain. One sentence. They stoned him. That's the solid ground. And outside, non-Christian writer, decades closer to the event than anyone else we have. But a later Christian writer named Josephus, quoted by the historian Eusebius almost 200 years afterward, tells a much bigger story. James thrown from the top of the temple, clubbed to death when the fall doesn't finish the job, begging God to forgive his killers on the way down. It's a great scene. It also echoes Stephen's death in Acts, and even Jesus' own crucifixion a little too neatly, which is exactly the kind of thing that should make you suspicious of a source that late. Treat Josephus as legend built on top of a true event, not a transcript. One more honest wrinkle. Catholic and Orthodox tradition reads brother, here as cousin, or a son of Joseph from an earlier marriage, not a full sibling, because of a separate belief about Mary. Most historians reading the Greek plainly take brother at face value. I'm not settling a centuries-old theological argument in a 10-minute video. I'll just tell you it exists. Here's where I have to slow down, because there's an obvious objection, and it's a fair one. Family reconciliations happen all the time. Grief plays tricks on grieving people. Someone can sincerely come to believe something that isn't true, especially about someone they loved and just lost. That's a real possibility, and I'm not going to wave it off. If James's story were just a brother who came around, that objection would basically close the case. But notice what makes James different from an ordinary convert. An outsider hearing rumors of a resurrection could be mistaken in a dozen small ways. James wasn't an outsider. He'd have known things no stranger would. Whether his brother snored, lost his temper, got sick, was afraid of anything. If there were ever a person built to see through a family myth, it's the sibling who changed his diapers, not the crowd down the road. And it's not. He heard a rumor and came around. The earliest source we have, Paul's Creed, says flatly that James personally saw him. And there's a pattern worth sitting with. Two of the people who flipped hardest were not gullible strangers, but the two people with the least reason to want it to be true. Paul had been actively hunting down Christians. James had grown up calling his brother crazy. An enemy and a skeptic independently landing in the same place. Now, the full honesty. None of this proves a resurrection. Serious historians have real, alternative readings. Grief and guilt can push a family toward reconciliation on their own. The agnostic scholar Bart Ehrman grants that James, like the others, sincerely came to believe he'd seen his brother alive. He just thinks it was a vision born of loss, not literally a body standing in front of him. That's a real position. You should hear it, not just my version of it. But here's what stays on the table either way. A man who spent years thinking his own brother had lost his mind ended up running a church built entirely on that brother's claims and was killed rather than stop. Something moved him that far. The argument is only over what. If you want to go further than a 10-minute video can take you, look up the name scholars actually argue this out under. Habermas. Entiheit. Ehrman, on the other side. Read the real back and forth, not just the highlight reel. Because you don't have to believe James saw what he said he saw. But you do have to explain why the one person who'd watch him lose arguments, get hungry, and tie his own sandals, the one person on earth least likely to fall for it, spent the rest of his life and lost it insisting he had. Every answer to that costs you something. If that one sat with you a little good, that's the point. Stick around, and I'll see you in the next one.